Woohoo! There we go. Taxi! I guess an introduction is needed here. Project Southpaw, left-hand drive, Spanish, 1990 Range Rover. It's had one careful owner and several less careful owners. It's actually not in bad shape. So the chap who owns it has had a load of welding and stuff done on it, and now it's just a case of me performing a couple of other jobs, partly to tidy it up, but also primarily convert to right-hand drive. The steering wheel needs to be over there. I'll get that sorted out. That's not going to be too difficult. Might see if I can find another dash top for him, but this was quite shonky, but we'll see. He's piled all the bits up inside the car that came off it, that came with it. We're going to see what we're doing. This would have originally been a 2.5 litre VM diesel, and now it's got the 200 TDI engine in it. Where is the bonnet pull? There's the bonnet pull. There we go. One second. There we are, bonnet up. Okay, nice little 200 TDI engine. Leave alone. It's got a 2-inch lift on it at the moment, which is going to come off. The lift's been done via spring. So it's got longer springs, longer dampers and longer brake lines on it. I'm going to get all that sorted out, take it back down to its standard ride height. That's been done all round. Piles and piles and piles of stuff. Headlamps are left-hand drive, I think. I'll just double check that. I've basically been out and bought a ton of bits in the back of the car. We put a jerry can in there. But a ton of bits in my car, which are now in the unit, really to try and help this job, move it forwards a little bit. I think primarily it's going to be heater unit out, and then sort the bulkhead, loom, steering box, and so forth. Get the thing converted to right-hand drive as painlessly as we possibly can. And then, really, with a view to kind of get this dent on the roof up there, really with a view to getting it MOT'd as a right-hand drive vehicle, then the registration process can start to get it a UK registration. Because it was sold new in Spain, although it was manufactured in the UK, Nova declarations all completed, all of that was done. And it was MOT before, but the owner fell into a couple of minefields with the DVLA, the preventers of vehicle registration. Right, inventory is completed, work is starting. So first and foremost, let's get the steering wheel off. Someone's had this off already, or it wasn't very tight. Not a huge issue. Steering wheel off on these things is one of the things that I think a lot of people struggle with, but they're really not difficult, provided you've got the right tools, of course. The right tool. And all you do with this fella, it even comes with 2 little threaded holes underneath the washer. And the trick here is to just work one-handed, as we traditionally do. That needs to go into there. Just literally just a couple of threads will do it. Likewise with the other one. Middle bolt coming out a bit further. Ta-da! One steering wheel off. Right. So I've got a world of stuff to do, and I'm just going to crack on with it. But I'm going to get basically the dash pod. I'm going to get the controls off. I'm going to get the dash top off. I'm going to get the heater unit out, and then I can see basically where the enemy is from that point onwards. And then we'll start converting this thing over to having the steering on the correct side of the vehicle. Oh yes. Right, just summing up at the end of day one, 4 hours in on this. Got the dash all out. Can now see the routing of the loom. So tomorrow I'm going to get the pedal box and the steering column out and really understand exactly what is required of the loom. God knows what happened here, by the way. I reckon the front prop shaft came off. And I reckon that someone was being utter hooligan and yanked the front prop shaft, and it has come upwards and clattered big time. So I don't know quite how they managed that, because you really have to go some. I think it's been abused a bit, this car, on occasions. I'm not planning on fixing that. It's just might beat it a little bit back into shape again, but it looks like it's had all sorts of welds and stuff put on it. But how about that, eh? That's what happens on the prop shaft, because there's the prop down there. You can just about see it there. So it's right underneath the flange. For now. Bulkhead loom is all out now. So all I've got remaining is door looms, rear of the car loom, that wire up there, that one, that's for fog lights, that's been retrofitted, so I'm happy with that, that can stay there. Little connectors to go to the back of the car, connectors to go to the back of the car, connectors to the door, that's it. Took the executive decision to pull the whole front axle. We've got the brakes disconnected because we're going to put new brake lines in. I want to re-bush it because all the bushes are rubber and tired. Dampers are knackered. Springs have got 2-inch lift on them. Well, check out these for dampers. These are good. They just don't do anything. Actually, it's better than some of them I've seen. There's no hydrogen left in that. Never mind. Okay, so here's a funny. Yes, it is. So we've got the outer race of the front wheel bearing out, but now the problem is I can't get the hub any further because it's all jammed in with the remains of probably the inner bearing as well. So I expect the same mess has been made on the inner bearing. That explains why we had so much play on there, because the bearing, that is the bearing. So this is the remains of the inner bearing, and as you can see, similar state of disassembly down to its component parts. I decided to yank the CV joint out, see what's going on there, and it's in a similar state of distress, to be honest. It's an original Hardy Spicer CV joint, rusty. It's never a good sign when you take one of these out and it's rusty. Pulled all the balls out of it for now. And you can see here, look at the wear marks on the inner part of the cage. If I put some shade over it, it is just utterly ruined. This thing would have been knocking like a good one. So I'm going to put new CV joints on as well. These things come apart fairly easily, but I started to reassemble it, and because it's got so many grooves and bits of wear in the same place, nothing's gone back in the same place as it came out, so I can't even get the last ball in. That's how bad this one is. It's as bad as I've ever seen one. I'm not going to move the handbrake across. That's at the customer's request. I need to sort the loom out. That's the biggest concern I've got now. So I'm going to do some research onto loom tonight. I'm going to talk to a chap who's got parts and supply and see if we can come up with a possible solution for what we're going to do with loom. Because the only then viable alternative would be to send the left-hand drive loom that I've got away to someone like Autosparks, and they can rebuild one for me. They'll use it as a pattern to build up a new one. Right, today commencing strip down front hubs, getting these old left-hand drive swivels off, and cleaning everything up. Check the diff for contamination, strip the other end down. Ben's up here on the parts washer. We've replenished the fluid in here. It doesn't look like it, but we have replenished the fluid in there. It was very, very, very tight. The parts wash fluid which is down there ready to be tipped. Not in a drain. It'll go to a responsible outlet for recycling hazardous materials. And we put neat TFR in there because we couldn't find any decent parts wash fluid. So I managed to get that from Euro car parts. There's 50% offer. Blah 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 blah. I managed to pick up 40 litres of it for 40 quid. Not bad, eh? Right, I'm cracking on with taking this fucker apart. Come off. So what we got? Right, so once the retaining seal thing has come off, you can then pull the seal out. Right? Now the seal's out, I can undo the top pins and lift the swivel housing off. And then once we've got the swivel housing off, we can start looking at the swivel housing damper on the bottom and working out if there's anything on the swivel housing I need to keep, otherwise it's just going to get bagged up and put in the shed as left-hand drive. Right, so knocked back the tabs, undone the 2 bolts, which also secures the brake flexi housing. I'm just going to take those old brake flexis off there. And then we've got the swivel pin at the top here with a wedge of shims underneath it. So I'll take the swivel pin out. I'll retain the shims because they're always useful to hang on to these old shims. They just need a clean up. And then we should be able to slide the whole housing forwards and off. That's how you get a front swivel housing. So there's 2 bolts that hold the front hub onto the axle. They're big bolts, admittedly, but there's just 2 bolts that do that. Now, I'm going to need to go in here and give this a monster clean out. In fact, I might even end up taking the swivel bowl off and giving it a clean. Because I'm just worried about swarf and shit that it might be in there because of the wheel bearings breaking up. Although it's on the other side of the stub axle, I just don't know. This is the top swivel bearing from that side. I believe it's new. I have no idea what's caused that distortion. It's almost like it's been clamped in something. I mean, just why? Anyway, cleaned up the old hubs that have come off the axle, cleaned up the new hubs that are going on the axle, and we're going to be organised about doing that lot. There's the axle itself. The ball needs to come off this end because we need to press in a new race for the... that's not claret, by the way, that's Geyser. Needs pressing a new brace for the top one. I'll probably replace all the bearings anyway. Disc. Right, let's yank this CV joint away. I mean, already Ben has observed there's some spectacular heat damage and wear on this edge here. It is a GKN, so it's not a Hokey 5000 joint. It's probably the original joint to the car, but it is spectacularly ruined. There's the ridge across there. I mean, honestly, it's like the Himalayas. Right, let's get one of these bastards apart. What you basically need to do is work on one side and pivot, if you can, pivot the bearing upwards, and then pivot to the middle section even further. So it's going, you've got the inner cage, the cage itself, or the inner part of the CV joint, the cage itself, and then the outer cage. And all I've done is I've pushed the middle one up, the inner, the ball comes out, whatever. Then do the same thing. So push the cage itself, then rotate the inner part, and that ball should now come out, but it's stuck. It's stuck probably because of a ridge. Just keep working around until you find another one that comes out. What I might need here is a screwdriver. This is really stiff, this one. Notchy. Let's get a screwdriver, flat blade screwdriver. That'll do it. Right, okay, so pushing the cage in a direction. There we are, done that. We've already done that ball, so let's do the next ball to it. There we are, and push the inner part even further, and then flick the ball out. And then rotate round to the next one. Again, really notchy. This is not going to survive this one. That's going to come out. Rotate that around there. That one's out. And then round the other direction. The problem now is I think these 2 balls down here have started to fall out because they're so worn, because the inner cage now is loose. Might have just jammed this whole fucking thing up. Oh, there we go. There's the next ball. For those of you who were counting, there's 6 of them. God, that's a good old switch, that bonfire. That was actually wedged in there. wedged in the cage. Never good, is it? I was going to rotate the cage round now on its axis. Get the next one out. And then the last one. Rotation the cage around until I find it. There it is, it's already popped out. Then, having done that, flatten the cage, rotate the inner section of the CV joint, and get it to a point where you can just wiggle it out. It's a fiddle because it's greasy. And again, it's so notchy. I've got a feeling this is going to be spectacularly fucked when it comes apart. That one, you bastard. I mean, even with no balls in it, I can't bloody move the cages around. Put those over there. The balls always seem to wear evenly. Never yet had one where it's been obvious wear to one of the balls. For now, what I can do though is I can see the shiny section on here. It's got wear. It's not as bad as the other one we were looking at. There it comes. Right, there comes the inner section. What we're really looking for here is wear like that. You can actually see the track through the middle there where the ball's gone. So that would have been clicking and slopping around like a good one. I think it's certainly at the end of its service life. Now, individual components within the CV joint, it's just not worth putting them together. Okay, so there you can see again, big track going right away through the middle of that. Get the cage out. This cage is still really, really stiff in here. Rotate it so it's vertical, and then you should be able to wiggle it out. There we are, it's out. Again, it's difficult to see the wear on the cage itself. Normally the wear occurs on the inner and the outer sections of the race. So if I wipe all this off, you can see there's shiny sections around here. There's a big heat haze around there. This thing's overheated, I think, at some point. Probably been running really dry. Car's come from Spain. So you've got the added ambient temperature as well on top of the complete and utter lack of lubrication and oil. And then the last part of the joint is here. And what we're really looking for is the other chamber here that the ball would run in. And again, you can see there's pitting and there's all sorts of marks all the way around here where the ball is just completely worn. That's knackered. Yeah, beyond its service life, scrap bin. That's how you take one apart anyway. But that's the giveaway. You just take one ball out, clean that section up there, and if you can see it's mega shiny, and you can see the track where a ball would go going down like a gully, going down the middle of that section, that's really dead. Got the steering box and everything off. That's all out. Need to clear up all the chassis rails because there's quite a lot of glue. Need to replace some of the steering pipe. So I need to replace the pipe that goes from the reservoir, which is on this side, that goes across to the steering rack here. And I need to replace the high pressure pipe that goes from the pump down there across to here. The other pipe, the return pipe, is looking pretty grotty. I mean, it's seen better days really, hasn't it? So it'll probably end up being a complete set of pipes. Pushed up the bushes on the radius and the panhard rod. That's all out. Only need about 5 tons maximum. Got the sleeves out of here. I've kept the worst one. This is the worst one. That's beautiful, isn't it? I mean, that really is. That's just a work of art. Might make a piece of jewellery out of that, or I might just nail it on the wall. It can actually stay with this, which is the stub axle from its mate. I still haven't managed to get that piece off there. It turns, but I can't get it off. It goes that so far, then it hits all these ridges. So that's fucked. That's fucked. This one is tired. It seems pointless putting it back on again. It's seen far better days. There's certainly ridges on there where the bearings have been run dry. There was also water contamination on this side as well. So that's potentially recyclable. That one's scrap. I've got another couple which we took off the right hand drive hubs that were supplied. These are okay actually. If I'd have seen these before I ordered new ones, I'd have probably used these ones. Never mind, I've ordered new ones now. And that one as well is serviceable. Just give it a good clean, wrap it up, stick it in the box on the shelf. Not the first time I'll need to put a stub axle on a car. I'm going to take this ball out. I've worked out what happened. I think I've worked out what happened with that little bearing. So remember the top bearing pin, top or bottom, that looked like that. And I was thinking, what the heck? And I think what's basically happened is someone has used this to pull in the seats. Yeah, I think that's what's happened. It's not good. Anyway, I'm going to have to pull that seat out now. There's a lot easier ways of pulling them in rather than destroying a bearing cage, because one of those rollers doesn't turn at all now. Not sensible, but these things happen. Getting myself all organised up here to fit up the pin carriers for the car moving across the right hand drive. So I've labelled everything that's left hand drive as left hand drive. I had a real bugger getting the bottom pin out of this side. I needed to get the bottom pin out because I had to recover the damper, the swivel damper, which is fitted to later hubs. Didn't come with these hubs. So yeah, one bolt has utterly seized inside there. It's seized inside this housing. It's rusted in solid. And again, that would lead to water contamination inside the hub. Just through, I guess, lack of care when it was being off-roaded in Spain. Yeah, so these are the left-hand drive parts, all left-hand drive, written on everything that's left-hand drive. And these are the bits I'll be working with when the new parts arrive tomorrow. I've made sure that the fill and the drain plugs work. They do. Horsey, horsey. And that's about it really. So we've done well today. We've got ourselves into a position really where there's not a huge amount more to dismantle. I want to take the spring plates off, or maybe I just won't. Might not bother, but I was thinking about getting them off so I could put the proper spring retainers back on. That cup needs to come off the end there, which isn't too much of a problem. That one can stay because I'm going to reuse those bearings. They were quite new. I've cleaned them, I've checked them. There's one of them. You can see that one's not been mashed or mangled. Well, it has been a little bit. No, it hasn't, it's just grease. That one's okay. I think what he's done is he's just used one new bearing to push all the bloody things in rather than one old bearing. Whoever did it. Anyway, so we're moving forwards. It does help we use these pens that write on turds just to mark everything up, because that way, you see, when I'm putting it together and I decide I'm going to use one of these parts and build this hub up and get all the tolerances sorted out and get everything beautiful on it, and then find, oh fuck it, I'll put a left-hand drive one on. It won't be popular. It will not be a good move. Next up, we're going to pop the steering box back into place. So cleared access, which is a lot easier now. We're going to right-hand drive because we haven't got all the intercooler pipes from the turbo. I shall pop the steering box in place. Once that's in, because it's easier working without the axle in place to put the steering box. You can do it with the axle in place, but it's just easier with it not in place. Then we'll slide right on the right here. We've got the springs that I've taken off the car, which I think were a 2-inch lift. On the left are new springs from Famous 4, which have got a 1-inch reduction in ride height. Quite a radical difference, and this is obviously the uncompressed weight. So we're just about to put these fellas on. Pretty straightforward. Thursday, 4 o'clock, just put the springs, new dampers back onto the largely refurbed axle. Got to go and get a spacer for this drive shaft, because when I pulled it out, there's no spacer on there, which should sit between the CV joint goes on here. There should be a spacer there. It's not there, it doesn't exist. How crazy is that? Right, so we're going to pop out again in a minute and get those local factors got them in. And then we can start building this axle up, build the hubs up, get the brakes back on. Start building that. There it is, new one. This goes on the end of the drive shaft. So pull the drive shaft out just a wee bit. and that then goes on there and acts as a space, so the CV joint sits in front of it. For some reason it wasn't on the drive shaft. It is now. Right, I'm going to assemble this now. Yay! It's raining again. So the last 4 days in Devon we've had mild downpours with torrential downpours interspersed with it's getting fucking wet. Right.
I'm actually getting rained on here.
Not getting rain. Oh yeah, get rains inside the barn. Right, okay, down here. What I've had to do here, this wing I think has been replaced, this inner wing. And down here, it wasn't making a firm contact. This was all hidden by the servo and the clutch master. Huge blobs of, I think what is either filler or window putty all the way along here. And while that edge is fine, I'm happy with that edge, I'm going to leave that alone. This edge up here was tragic. It was covered, all this is sand. Yeah, so it's had sand jettisoned up there and it was rusting through. Down this edge down here, this is all just tragic now. So I'm going to cut right the way down here and make a new lip for this whole section. I know it's been welded already, Tim, but it just needs to be tidier than this. So I'm cutting out, this was the bit that I originally found, this rusty chunk up here. That's all coming out in a minute. There's a double skin on the floor pan, which isn't too much of a problem because I can see that he's done a reasonable job of putting a new floor pan at some point, the previous owner has. And it's all right, there's a big lump of filler there as well, see? It's just filler everywhere. And then just cleaning all this shit up and getting it sorted out. There's probably a reason why it's been ignored in the past, and that's largely because of all of the brakes and the pedal box and everything all being in the way. But now that's out of the way, I can address this. On this side, the situation's a whole load better. So, okay, on the inner wing section, there's a couple of blobs there, but the under wing section is all quite solid. There's no real issues down here. So I'll just clean all this lot up. In fact, when you go to see Mr. Rustbuster, he will make sure that that's all treated underneath. I've put some rust converter, heaven's sake, I put some rust converter on the top of it, ready to keep the rust at bay. We're going to put the pedal box in later on, but then I got distracted by doing this. And also up here, this is above, this is the bulkhead above where the pedal box would have been. We caught it in time, but this is a classic Range Rover rust area up here. So we're going to treat all of that lot when I finish welding. That bracket that goes onto the floor pan is fine. Been at it with a hammer and everything, it's all fine. It just wants a new piece of metal butting up to the inner wing. And then I'm going to... Right, so cut all the shit out, ended up with edges of steel that I can actually weld to. And I think on this particular case, I'm going to do away with the flange for now that goes around here and creates a natural mud trap. And I'm going to weld a bracket, like an L section over the corner here. It's what I've done with the blue car on when I did the driver's side. And it's not going to pass a concourse competition, I'm sorry about that. But it's going to be more resistant to rust traps. It'll also give the footwell on the side panel a lot more strength. And then the only thing I need to do is to extend this side down to where the red mark is, so that I can drill 2 holes through it, and then bolt the lower front wing mounted bracket back on again. So we've got a bit of a challenge now. Couple of bits of steel, get the tickly stick out, clean up these edges on the inside here. We've got a load of welding being done on the floor down here. I think this is the recent stuff you had done, Tim, wasn't it? That panel there on the corner, but then I've cut all of this lot out. Now, in fairness to your welder, none of this was accessible when the loom was all in place. So while the loom's all out, it makes sense to sort this area out and get it sorted out properly for the sake of an hour or two of metal fabrication and sorting panels out. That side, I'm happy with. No problem at all with that. Your welder's done a lot more work around the bottom of the bulkhead side panel and also up the edge where it goes up towards this bit here. So all of that I'm happy with on the driver's side, new driver's side I should say. And on the old driver's side we're going to do exactly the same thing more or less. What a laugh. Right Ben, time to get another belt on that sander and start cleaning these edges up.